Hi guys, I'm Josh Allen from PSC Motorsports, and today we're going to be installing a electric hydraulic kit for a 392. So let's get started. So this is our electric power steering kit. It comes with one electric power steering pump, 3 quarts of fluid, one mounting bracket, a cooler. You got your cooler lines right there, your cooler line adapters, your plugs, and your mounting hardware right there. And that's pretty much the electric power steering kit. So the cylinder assist side of your kit includes your gearbox, your cylinder, your mounting hardware for your stock axle, your cylinder assist lines, your Hines, and your hardware. And that's pretty much it on your cylinder assist kit. All right, so our first step, we grab our trusty bungee cord. We're going to hook it onto the seat frame underneath. All right, and we're going to take it, run it up through the steering wheel, and back down to the seat frame on the other side, and secure it so that our steering wheel will stay straight when we disconnect the steering shaft from the gearbox, so that we don't break any clock springs. Now let's get started under the hood. Now we're going to flop the hood back. Be sure to have some rags ready so that you can flop it all the way back and let it sit against the windshield and not scratch your hood. We're going to pull out all of our little push pins, right? So there should be 6 push pins. And now we're ready to pull the grill. So grab the top of the grill, peel it a little bit, right? Now you grab the bottom and you just pull. There. Now, if you have a camera on the front, you disconnect the camera. You got 4 bolts holding the fenders on. One right there, one right here, one right here, so we got one little pigtail right here. She's always a fun one. Oh, that one's really. So now you got your fender off. Now you can get to your electric pump very, very easily. All right, so your first step of taking your intake off, loosen up the boot on the throttle body, pull the clips out of the intake boot, undo the wiring harness, flop it back on itself, one 10mm right here. All right, you zap that guy out. I always just set it up in there. You pull off the breather off there. Now you pull out the intake. So after removing the air box, we're going to remove the high pressure line. The high pressure line is the one closest to the radiator. Then your low pressure line. Your low pressure line is the one closest to the firewall. And you do not need to retain the low pressure line because it gets swapped out for any of our kits, hydraulic, electronic, it doesn't matter, because we always put a cooler in line of the system. So now you want to have your drip pan ready. As soon as you pop those lines off, it's going to start leaking everywhere. You also want to take off the cap on an electric reservoir so that it starts draining out and you don't make a big mess everywhere. Alright, so now we pop off our clips just like that. So now we have room to get to our 10mm right here. So we undo this guy right here. And so this is our high pressure line right here that we're undoing. And if you're using the electric power steering kit, be sure not to damage this line because you reuse it. Boom. Now we're going to undo the top of the little reservoir. So now we can undo our mounting hardware for our pump, which is two 13 millimeters. So we undo those guys so that we can pull this up and start pulling it out, but don't jump the gun yet, because now we need to undo the factory line right here. Boom. And now our electric pump is out. Throw it out. So after you loosen the 18 millimeter on the gearbox side and popped it off the pump side, typically I cut the low pressure hose right here and here, and it makes it coming out a lot easier, because if you don't, you got to loosen up a lot of other stuff to get it out as a one piece. Pain in the butt. Alright, so before you install your pump in your Jeep, we want to reinstall the stock reservoir. And this is just a fill tube, it's not a reservoir. So go ahead and get that guy on there. Make sure she's pointed up. Grab your pliers. As soon as you get the clamp down onto the little nipple right there, make sure it's rotated in the right position, and we're ready to drop it in. So we're going to go ahead and install our electric pump. So we're going to slide our reservoir up into its home. Now she's home. And let's also make sure, before you jump too far, that your high pressure line drops into its hole. Alright, so now we got our HAL 142. So this is your hose going to from your electric pump to your cooler. So let's go ahead and install it. So the hooked in, we're going to go ahead and slide that guy on down there. Slide it right in between here. Right? On up. Just like that. And now you'll have a 6 fitting on the back side of the electric pump. We have a very good picture in our instructions about this. And you just thread that guy on there. And so that's your return side. Your pressure side's on, your fill tube's on. All you got left is to plug in the electric pump. Put your two 13 millimeter bolts back in, tighten these guys up, and your electric pump is in. So you got one pigtail right here, and you have 5-10 millimeters, and we're going to remove this little metal bracket so that we can pull the gearbox out of the top and we don't have to drop it out the bottom. So let's get it going on these 10 millimeters. So now you got all your bolts loose. Let's go ahead and pull the wiring loose. There should be one more there. Alright, so now we got all our wiring off it. Now we can take this and rotate it and get this guy out of the way. So now your airbox bracket's out. Now you have good access to the top of the gearbox and really good access to this 13 millimeter right here from your steering shaft to your gearbox. So we can undo that, and let's get the pitman arm too. We can edit that out. Alright, so with your nut barely on there so it catches it, don't hit you in the face, you're going to hit the pitman arm right about a 45-degree angle from straight. So, boom, drops down. Now, after you get that input shaft, your gearbox is ready to come out. And once again, before you separate this, make sure your steering wheel is secure. Take your bolt out. Should be able to just walk it off, set it down. We're going to take our high pressure line right here and kind of flop it out of the way. Now we have 4 bolts left. We got one there, one there, one there, one there. All right, so what my trick is, I always like to take a ratchet strap, put it right there. Depending on your ratchet strap, you might have to go a little bit further back on the frame, but luckily there's plenty of holes to choose from. We're just going to try to ratchet that back a little bit so that we have clearance to those. Let's grab our impact with our trusty 18 millimeter socket. Let's zap out the inside ones first. Leave all but one. You want to grab this guy and slowly let her eat until she's free. Drop down your tools and let's fish her out. So you grab your 46 millimeter and zap off that nut. So now we got that off. Now let's put it on our new steering gear. Alright, so now you have your pitman arm off your original gearbox. You're about to put it onto, if you have your small bore, it's going to, you're going to reuse your pitman arm. If you get a big bore kit, you use the supplied pitman arm. But anyways, so pitman arm, you want it in the same orientation that it came off. And if you notice, there is one key on here, so it can only go on one way. But you want the pitman arm side, or the side that attaches to the drag link, to go to the front of the box, opposite of the input shaft. Now we're going to put our nut on, grab our old trusty impact, put the poop to it. Now we're going to grab our trusty torque wrench. I've already set to the proper spec. That's 220 foot-pounds of torque on there. So let's give it a good old torquing. So now, the gearbox is ready to be installed. So let's go ahead and throw it in the Jeep. Before installation, you just want to make sure your red mark on your gearbox and on your sector shaft are lined up, because it makes everything easier later on down the road. So with your gearbox, you get 2 O-rings supplied with it. Usually comes with a little red zip tie, but these O-rings are to replace your factory O-rings right here. So you just simply get a pick, get that sucker off there, throw the new one on. With some residual fluid, we need to make sure this O-ring is lubricated so it don't cut when you're trying to install. Now we're going to take our gearbox, slip it on in. Our gearbox is in home. So now, let's get some bolts started. So now you got all your bolts started. Now let's impact them down. So now our gearbox is in place. Now let's get our high pressure line on, and then we'll start with our low pressure. So on your JL box, your high pressure will be your first port to the front of the vehicle. So now let's go ahead and start that. And you always finger start these. Now it's started. Let's grab our wrench. So now this guy is all snug and tight. Now let's take this side off. So now we're going to install our SFO2 into our low pressure side. Just like everything else, started with our fingers. And that guy will be a 3/4. So now we got our 3/4 ratchet. Now let's just go ahead and tighten that down. And you don't want to over tighten it because it is still going into aluminum. So you can pull the threads if you over tighten it. But now that that's there, let's put our low pressure line. So let's go ahead and feed that. But now, let's go ahead and put it onto the SFO2. So now we slide our input shaft onto there. Now let's go ahead, and when you install your bolt, make sure the side that you're installing from has no threads and you're going into threads. Now we're ready to drill our holes for our cooler. So now we need to, if you have a winch, probably going to have to remove it to get clearance to drill your holes. So let's get to it. So now we've removed the winch out of the way. So now we're ready to drill our holes. So we're going to just, the first hole will be in the second slot, a 1/2 inch away from the slot, midway, right? Then we're going to go to the 4th hole, and it's going to be on the inner side towards the driver, and half an inch away from the slot, and that will give us room. So now we're going to start drilling. So now you punch through the first side. Now you're going to start on the back side, and you want to be careful because when you get almost through, you don't want to push all the way through into your AC condenser. Alright, so now we're going to put our cooler together. So let's put our fittings in our cooler. Let's tighten these guys up. Now let's get the brackets ready to mount. So now we got our bracket on there. We're going to tighten it up a little bit, but not all the way. All right, now we're ready to mount it. So we got our cooler now. Let's install it in our holes that we drilled already. We're going to go ahead and stick our 1/4-inch bolts through the holes. Now let's put our washers on the other side. Our nuts. One side started. Now we got those. Now we can start our line from our gear or from our electric pump. And I do suggest to put the lines on after you get it started and loose. Now let's get our line from our gearbox on. Make sure we're not touching anything on the radiator or anything like that. Let's go ahead and tighten up the cooler bracket, and we're ready to reinstall the winch. So this is our cylinder assist side. So we're about to ready to install it. So we have the cylinder, our hoses, our mounting hardware, and we're about ready to throw it on the Jeep. So let's get it done. Alright, so first start, we're going to pull off the stock stabilizer. And as you see, we're going to have to pull off the stock drag link right here to retrieve that bolt right there. But for right now, we can get the rest of it off. And we're going to zap off the other side of the bracket. So now we got our stock stabilizer out. Now we can put our bracket in. So to retrieve this bolt, you're going to have to drop this one, but to drop that one, you got to drop this one. So it's a 21. So you get this one to come free. Right, so now that you can retrieve that guy out, and you might as well pull this guy out and set her off to the side for now. Now let's go ahead and throw our bracket onto the axle tube, and then throw that on there. So when we throw our cylinder on there and start slamming everything back together. So our first step, right, go ahead and throw these clamps around the tube, kind of get them in their position. Alright, we'll throw the bracket up there. These two holes right here, use your stock hardware. Kind of get that guy in position there so that you can line up your bolts. Go ahead and throw this guy around there. Now always throw the head of the bolt going through the bracket to the back side with the nut. Just so if you have any stick out, it's on the back side. And you don't want to tighten anything down until you have all of it together. So you want to make sure you tighten the factory hardware before you tighten those down, so that the factory bracket holds it to the right plane, and now you can tighten your clamps. So now you'll take your bracket, you'll slide it onto the stock or the stock tie rod, slide your bolts in, get them started. So now that guy's started, take your 3/4 wrench and socket. And after those guys are cranked down, you're going to take your 21 millimeter. You're going to put your drag link back up in place. Before you put your tie rod. Now that guy's in there. We can loosely sit it in the pitman arm. Right there. Just so it's out of the way for now and won't hit you in the noggin. Alright, so now we're ready to install our cylinder. So we're going to take our bolt, slide her in on in, start the nut on the bottom, and now we're ready to do the other side. So now we got our bolt in. Now we need to drag this in over to the hind and start our bolt on our other side. So let's start getting her over there. And this is easier if you have somebody inside the vehicle turning the steering wheel, where you can just yell at them a little bit more, a little bit less. So now we're going to slide it up into place, and I always like to loosen the caps. Just be careful, because if there's any fluid in there, and if you pull on the rod, it might shoot out. All right, so now we're just going to try to line up this. Now she's in. We just got to start the thread on the bottom side. And this bolt is 15/16 right here. And just start turning away. So now you got that guy ran down. Let's go ahead and snug it up. Let's snug the other side. And now you're ready to put the lines on. So now, if you're non-cylinder assist, you don't need to pull these caps off. But if you're putting cylinder assist on, you need to pull the caps off. So it's 11/16. It's always easier to loosen these caps while the gearbox is out of the vehicle. That side's loose, so now let's pull the caps off so that we can put our cylinder on. So you put your long line goes to the closest to the input shaft, and your short line on at least these Jeeps go to the one closest to the radiator. Alright, so you finger started the line on the gearbox. Now let's do it on the cylinder side, and you always do this before you tighten either line, so that you can make sure the line's nice and happy, and you're not trying to fight the line because you tightened one side before you could start the other side. Okay, so now that side's tight. Now you can tighten your other side. Now let's start the driver's side. So now you get that side finger started. We can put the other side on the cylinder end. And now that's finger started. You can go ahead and tighten. Your last line. So now we're ready to put our line on. So let's go ahead and finger that guy on there. 11/16 again. Tighten it up. Tighten this guy up. And don't forget to tighten up your jam nuts after you have everything else tightened up. That's it. Alright, so now we're to the fun part. We got all the mechanical parts done. Now it's time to fill it up. So, we're going to get our True Blue and start filling it up. And you want to start this off with the vehicle off, and you're just going to keep going back and forth. And this is easier to be a two-person job. You got your buddy inside, just start working the steering wheel back and forth with the motor off. So, hey bud, start turning the wheels. And what they're doing here is every time he turns back and forth, you're letting a little bit more air out of the system, right? If you look right here on the reservoir, come on around. If you look back here, right here, you can see the fluid level dropping and going up, dropping and going up. You see it starting to kind of bubble. It means you're getting air out of the system. And you're just going to keep filling it up. You're just going to keep doing that for about 15 minutes. And your goal is to get 2 quarts, 2.5, before you even try to fire it up. So, now that we've almost got 2 quarts in the system, let's go ahead and fire her up. You'll see the level drop down immediately. That means there's still air trapped in the system somewhere. So we're going to start cycling it back and forth. And it is normal with cylinder assist for it to travel about 1 inch up or down. All right, so now you're almost all the way bled. Let's go ahead and drop it down on the ground. And let's go ahead and bleed it a little bit more, just turning the wheels back and forth. We can fire. This is Josh Allen with PSC Motorsports. We just finished up the electric 392 kit. We'll see you on the trails. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more.